In Flesh and Blood, cards bring value in different ways. The vast majority provide instantaneous value when played or when used to block, a single-use occurrence after which it goes to the discard. Then there are cards that provide longer-term value. Cards like Equipment can provide value to varying degrees. They may block and go away, may pop for an effect and be destroyed, or they can stay in play to provide lasting effects. Heroes also provide their value in different ways. They may facilitate a specific playstyle, they may add additional value to your cards, or they may provide a static and constant value. Understanding how a card fits into your overall strategy is critical to maximizing its value. Furthermore, that value may have very different impact depending on the format. So today we're going to specifically look at long-term and short-term value differences between CC and Blitz.
A huge shout out to our channel members for supporting what we do here. If you want to get involved with the channel and the Dice Commando community, please consider joining as a channel member. Remember, these videos are only possible with your support. You can show that support with a like, a subscribe, and by leaving us a comment and sharing your feedback. Community first, and go Commando.
Hey there, my Flesh and Blood friends. Welcome back to Dice Commando and Go Again, a fabulous cast. Thanks for checking in here on this lovely holiday weekend, Friday morning. So happy holidays to you, your family, your friends, and all those that you care about. Hope that whatever you celebrate or choose not to through this next couple of weeks goes well, and that you remain happy, healthy, and sane. And remember, if you need some time alone from the fam or whatever, make sure to take it. But anyway, know that we're here and listening, and hey, there'll be videos coming up. So keep checking in through the holidays. But yes, today I'm talking value and those value differences between cards and how those value differences present in terms of overall value between the two formats, specifically talking here CC and Blitz. Commoner doesn't really factor into this because you're not comparing equivalent card pools. Okay, now this cast was actually inspired in part by a comment I got on a What Would Adult Kassai Look Like video many moons back, before we knew what Adult Kassai was actually going to look like. And the comment very simply says, I was, as we've talked on here multiple times, heroes like Aria and Kassai, right? I'm talking, Cintauri Sellsword Kassai, had made the statement several times over the years that those heroes were, as they were designed, would probably be too good for Classic Constructed. And someone commented and basically called me on that and said, well, how are they too good in CC, but they're okay for Blitz? And the answer very simply is because Blitz is a different format. And there's obviously, but there's a couple key parts of that, in that the smaller health pool means the game goes faster, so there's less turns, and armor also carries a much greater weight in that format, and thus you can have different cards can basically bring different amounts of value. So one of the ones I want to start this conversation with is Fyendal's Spring Tunic. So Fyendal's Spring Tunic is probably the poster child card for the game. Everyone's very aware of that. Every 3 turns, you generate a resource effectively. Okay, so thinking about this card, now sure, you can store it and all that, but effectively every 3 turns, you have access to a resource. What that means is this card provides more and more value over the course of a longer game, right? You are incentivized to go longer and get more value out of this card if this is what you are playing, right? Makes absolute sense. And that's also why when we turn to Blitz, you will often see folks not using this card or skewing away from it in Blitz. Like Azalea oftentimes will use the Blossom of Spring because sometimes you don't have 3 turns to wait. You need to be able to pop on demand and get that resource when you need it to load Death Dealer or whatever it may translate to for other heroes, okay? And that's why, again, in CC, it's not, this card specifically, to be fair, is not CC versus Blitz, but there's definitely a long game argument there. And again, you are going to get more value out of this in CC when the games are longer because it takes generally more turns to get folks from 40 health to 0 than 20 health to 0. Okay, tracks and makes sense there. Now, the next example I want to put up in terms of the instantaneous value is Stormstriders, right? So Stormstriders is the infamous wizard boots that when it pops, lets you basically go on your opponent's turn. Now, this happens one time and it's destroyed. So a card like this tends to be better in Blitz when that one-time pop can eat up a greater amount of health. And when you're a wizard, you want to use this to kill your opponent. So it takes you less time to get down into the kill shot range. And this again tracks with data of the actual situation that we're in right now, where Kano was an absolute terror in Blitz for many years, finally just LL'd this last season, but still has quite a bit of room to go in Classic Constructed. Now, Icelander, of course, has done her thing in both formats. One of them, she actually did Worlds last year. She actually still did well without Stormstriders during that short period where that was banned over the Worlds weekend, right? Or the Worlds break, right? So again, Stormstriders, something like this, the single time pop type thing, generally will carry more weight in Blitz, something like a Courage of Blade hold or something like that. Again, Courage of Blade hold is phenomenal because it gives you the 2 block and the pop. And there are many other analogies out there similarly to that. Okay, and then you go into a card like Valiant Dynamo. Valiant Dynamo is a long-term game-esque, because obviously the longer the game goes, the more -1 counters you can remove, which effectively gives you 1 health each time, kind of 1 health each time, but it gives you 1 block each time. So obviously the longer the game goes, the better for you. However, you do need to play cards to get it, right? In order to get the second swing, you're going to somehow have to play cards. So you do essentially, what this is really doing in a translative state is it's really adding extra value to the cards you play. Because again, if you don't play the cards, you don't get this. So it's really kind of adding additional value to the cards you play, which again, the more cards you play, the more value you're going to get out of it. Right, but so does it have more value in Blitz or CC? Kind of neutral, honestly, because yes, you're going to get more counters removed in a CC game, but the impact of those counters are actually generally higher in Blitz because of the lower health pool. So that's why I think Valiant Dynamos is like the easy answer to look at this one and say, well, the more times you do it, it should be better in CC, it should be better in a longer game, which should translate to CC. I agree, that's correct, but it also has a bigger impact in Blitz. So I thought this was a very unique case to go into. All right, so now let's bring up the question at hand, which is Kassai, Cintauri Soulsword, and Aria Crimson Haze. All right, so Kassai, amongst the other things she does, her second sword attack each turn costs 1 resource less. And with Aria, your second attack each turn gains +1. Okay, so let's go ahead and just start with Aria because she's probably the easiest one of the two to quantify. Your second attack each turn gains +1. Okay, there's a reason that many Aria decks over the years tend to play, not necessarily fatigue, but they tend to play more drawn out matches because, again, the longer the game goes, the more value you get out of this. You don't have to do anything for it, especially with Kodachis on the table. You do not even have to consume a permanent card in order to do this. You automatically get the 1. So the more times that you can Kodachi for 1, Kodachi for 2, or yes, Kodachi for 1, come for 2, 7, or Kodachi or 1, 2, 1, 5, 1, 2, 1, 5, 1, 2, 7. Either way, you get what I'm saying. The more times that you can do that, the more value you're going to get out of Aria. Now, Aira's fine. Aria was fine. Now, sure, she's LL'd, so you can, I suppose, take whatever position you want on that. But Aria was in the game for a long time without becoming overpowered. There were other heroes above her and all that. All right, cough attack. Excuse me, folks. Yes, but Aria, again, the longer the game goes, the better. So in Blitz, by and large, because the games are shorter, the armor has higher impact, she was much more fine as compared to if she would have done that same thing in CC, where, I don't know what the average turn of Blitz is these days. Probably somewhere in like 4 to 5, probably. So let's say she's adding 4 to 5 value over the course of a game. What's the average number of turns in CC? Probably, geez, who the heck knows? I mean, even in an aggressive meta, it's probably at least 7, 8, maybe 10, something like that, right? And it's probably much higher than that, would be my guess. Maybe not. But even so, that's a significantly higher value threshold over the course of the game. Okay, now, much of the same argument we just described applies to Kassai here in this case as well. Now, there is one slight caveat with Kassai in that you have to, again, play a card in order to turn her on, right? But you have to somehow consume a card. So it's not as easy as Ira in terms of that. Like, again, Ira with her 2 weapons, it's just free, right? 1, 2, it's just free. Kassai, you do have to consume a card to do it, but hey, you've got the on-hit thing going as well, right? So to that point, that 1 resource saved over the course of a longer CC game starts to really, really, really add up and become very, very, very significant as compared to, again, maybe 4 to 5 times in a Blitz game. I'm not devaluing, because I was very, very, very good freeing up that extra resource to run a 1-3 instead of being limited to like the Iron Song response arc or something like that, or zeros. Absolutely phenomenal in terms of what it unlocked value for the Warriors. It's why she was so good. It's why she was so fun to play. But I can understand why others would be frustrated playing against that. But now imagine that you've got access to 3 copies of every card and a much longer game. I think there is a significant difference in terms of their performance between the two. And again, I do believe there's a reason that we never saw an adult Ira with an ability like this, right? It's a great learning tool ability because it's just always there. It's static, but it's pretty strong, right? And the same thing for Kassai. If you have cards that just do things and they provide that value over and over and over again, it's going to skew being more powerful the longer the game goes, thus splits to CC. So anyway, that's my take on that. Now let's go into the, evaluating cards based on your playstyle and what you're playing. In the intro, I flashed up several heroes kind of for their different things. Let me pull up my notes here and make sure that I'm doing this correctly. But there are certain heroes who really facilitate a specific playstyle, right? Dromai is a great example of that. Dromai herself really just isn't, and her weapon too, right? Because they really work as a pair. They're really just a vehicle for a certain playstyle, okay? So your value is really not even improving the value of your cards. It's giving you access to those cards and making that playstyle work, okay? You then have cards like Briar, for example, or Viserai. Viserai, both of the Runeblades in this case, they add extreme additional value to your cards, right? With Viserai, obviously, every Runeblade card you play gives you an additional, 0.8 value, I think, with the value of a rune chant. At least that's what I believe LSS roughly has it valued at. So, it's roughly in that range. But again, it's regardless of what the value actually is, they're unlocking additional value from those cards. Briar does the same thing. If you play 2 non-attacks, right, you get the go again, which in itself is generally worth roughly 1 or so, right? And then if you hit, you can get potentially an extra defense on a card, which is a little harder to value because it's, generally gives it to the non-attacks, right? So then it does give them to the non-attacks, which are generally lower in defense, so it kind of brings them up. So there's a little bit of necessarily trade-off there. But again, you see how she's unlocking that extra value. Then you add Rosetta on the end of that, which gives you a bonus for doing what you want to do anyway, and unlocking the extra value. Yeah, right. So in that case, is that better in CC or Blitz for that type of hero? The answer is it's about the same in each because it's based on your card consumption. Not necessarily, right, it's based on the cards, not how long the game goes or if you can stall, and you still have to be able to do that. So it's not like an Ira thing where you could potentially just stall and continue to get the value. You have to still play the card. So those types of heroes are about the same in each. And then you look at, again, heroes that provide static and constant, like the 2 we talked about. That's better the longer you go, okay? So understanding, again, how those cards fit into kind of your overall strategy and what you're trying to do is really important for picking the right cards. Again, we made a great example earlier about Tunic versus Blossom of Spring. One of those cards is worth way more than the other one for other reasons, right? But sometimes you see people playing the cheaper card because it adds more value based on what they need it for. So anyway, that's my piece today. Hopefully this made sense and resonated to some people. Just because a card is good in one format doesn't mean it's good in the other format, and you have to understand why. It's because the formats are very different, and value is treated very differently in each format in terms of, for some cards, in terms of what the value they bring is, long-term, short-term, instantaneous, sitting on the board and popping, and so on. So anyway, that'll do it for today. Thanks for watching, folks. Let me know in the comments what you want to add. If you agree, if you disagree, let me know. Nothing else. Go Commando.